How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chaf Aleph, Daf 21, Masechta Nazir, friends. Well, today we start the fourth parak of Masechta Nazir. It's kind of interesting stuff, maybe, if you find this stuff interesting, obviously. Friends, who's excited? Well, not who's excited, but I'll tell you, man, I don't even know. It's been an interesting experience learning Nidarim and Nazir and all that stuff. I mean, friends, can you imagine? We haven't had Rashi for like 4 months. That's crazy. It is gonna be cool to have Rashi back. Rashi is like the Gemara companion. I don't even want to admit what I've been doing for Masechta Nazir. Anyways, we're talking about interesting stuff. I don't know, let's jump in. Okay, we're going to start in Daf Chaf Amud Beis at the new Mishnah at the beginning of the fourth parak. Mishama reini Nazir v'shama chaveru v'omer va'ani kulam Nazirim. So, we've seen this before in different contexts, I think, which is you have Ruvain. Ruvain. This is like Gemara, man. Where did Gemara come from? Remember Ruvain and Shimon? Remember Yevamis? Oh my, that was crazy stuff. Can you imagine we all did Yevamis? Oh my gosh. How did we do that? That's a little nuts. Well, you have Reuven. Reuven says he's going to be a Nazir. Good for you, Reuven. V'shama chaveru, Shimon hears this and he says, oh, Va'ani, okay, yeah, me too. I guess we're all going to be Nazirs. All right, people. Va'ani, and then Levi hears it and says, oh yeah, me too. Me 3. Kulam Nazirim, all of them are Nazirs. Hutarishan u'chukulan. Now, if Reuven does Ataris Nedarim, so then Shimon and Levi are no longer Nazirs. If Levi gets Ataris Nedarim from his Nazirus, well, good for you, Levi, but it doesn't have any effect on Reuven and Shimon. Fine. Omar Areni Nazir. If Reuven says that he is a Nazir, V'shama chaveru v'omer pi kefiv v'sayri kisayroi, Harez Nazir. So if Reuven says that he's going to be a Nazir, and then Shimon hears and he says, my mouth is like his mouth, and my hair is like his hair, well, Shimon's going to be a Nazir. Hareni Nazir, a fellow says that he's a Nazir, V'shama ishto, v'omer v'ani, and his wife hears and she says, me too. Mefer es shalav v'shelo kaim, so he could be Mefer her Naziris, but his Nazirus remains intact. However, Hareini Nazira v'shama baila, if she says that she's going to be a Nazira, v'shama baila v'amar v'ani, and her husband hears it and says, me too, eino yachol lahafer, he cannot be Mefer her Neder Nazirus. And I think we'll go with the Havaminat being that if she says she's going to be a Nazira, and he says me too, if he's made for her Nazira, then he's Memele being made for his Nazirus too, right? Because assuming that his Nazirus is dependent on her Nazirus. So if he's made for her Nazirus, then Memele is made for his Nazirus as well, but he can't be made for his own Nazirus. He has to do Ataris and Darim on that. So therefore he can't be made for her Nazirus. Harini Nazir ve'at, if he says, I am a Nazir, and you, v'amru amin, and she says, yep, she says amin. Mefer es shalai ki be mefer her Nazirus v'shelo kaim, but his remains intact. Haredi Nazira ve'atu, if she says that I'm a Nazira, and what about you? V'amru amin, and he says amin, enu yachol hafer, so again, he's unable to be mefer, and I think we'll go with the argument being that because if he's mefer her Nazirus, then memele his is going to fall apart as well, and he can't be made for his own Nazirus. Says the Gemara, Yosef, Rish Lakish kamed Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Ho. Rish Lakish was sitting before Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Who is Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya? Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was the grandson of Rabbi, the son of, I think, Rabbi's son Gamliel. Rabbi also had a son Shimon. Where did we learn about that? At the end of Masechta Ksubis, where we talked about the death of Rabbi? Is that what we talked about? His 2 sons? Gamliel and Shimon. Anyways, Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was the grandson of Rabbi, I believe the son of Rabbi's son Rabbi Gamliel. I think it's the 3rd Rabbi Gamliel. Okay, fine. So Yosef Rish Lakish came with Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Rish Lakish was sitting before Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. V'yosef v'kamar v'ushet piso kulon b'soch kidei dibur. That they all had to have been in toch kidei dibur. So meaning, if Reuven says, I'm a Nazir, and then Shimon says, me too, Levi says, me too, they all have to be within toch kidei dibur, the amount of time that it takes to speak. V'chama toch kidei dibur, how much is the amount of time that it takes to speak? Kidei shelas shalim, the amount of time that it takes to say hi. V'chama, to make a greeting. V'chama kidei shelas shalim, and how long does it take to make a greeting? Kidei shomer shalom talmud l'rab, it's the amount of time that it takes for a student to say shalom to his teacher. Ai shalom alecha Rebbe. So basically the amount of time that it says that it takes to say 3 words. So therefore, if Reuven says he's a Nazir, Shimon says va'ani, Levi says va'ani, so it's 2 words in. So that is enough. But if it takes too long, so then they can no longer say va'ani. Omerle, so if Yudah Nasiya says to Rish Lakish tuvlo shavakt ravcha l'tamida, but what would happen in a situation where Reuven says that he's going to be a Nazir, and then Shimon's Rebbe passes by, and he says to his Rebbe, Shalom Alecha Rebbe, then he already misses opportunity to say Va'ani to Reuven's Nazirus, so it must be that there's actually a little bit more time than that. That it's enough time to say Shalom Alecha Rebbe, but then that the student also would still have an opportunity to say Va'ani. So basically the amount of time it says to say 4 words. Okay. Tani Nami Achi. So we have a brisa supporting Reish, we have a brisa supporting Rish Lakish, who says that you have to say it within toch kidei dibur. Misha Omar Reini Nazir. If Reuven says that he's going to be a Nazir, V'shama Chaviru, and Shimon hears that V'shah kidei dibur, and he waits the amount of time that it takes to say Shalom Alecha Rebbe, V'Omar Va'ani, and then after that period he says Va'ani, Hu Asur V'Chaveru Mutter. So Reuven is a Nazir, but Shimon is not, because he waited too long. V'chama kidei dibur, kidei she'la shalom Talmud, l'Rav, right? The amount of time that it takes for a student to say Shalom to his teachers, Shalom Alecha Rebbe. Let's say that the following brisa supports our Mishnah Lemaise. Let's say that our Mishnah supports Reish Lakish. Misha Amar Reini Nazir, that if Reuven says that he's a Nazir, V'shama Chaveroi, and Shimon hears V'Amar Va'ani Va'ani, so Shimon hears it, Levi hears it. We want to say that also if Yehuda hears it, so Kilu, the point being that if it were like Rabbi Yudah Nasiya, that Davka you have Toch Kidei Dibur plus 1, so then the Mishnah should have explicitly pointed out, right, that Misha Amar Reini Nazir V'shama Chaver V'Amar Va'ani 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 Va'ani. It should have said 4 Va'anis, right? 3 words for, Shalom Alecha Rebbe, Va'ani, Va'ani, Va'ani. And according to Rabbi Yudah Nasiya, you also have enough time for 1 more Va'ani. Now, for the fact that the Mishnah didn't specify 4 Va'anis, so Memele, it means that it's only within Toch Kidei Dibur, no more than that, right? V'sham Chaver Va'amar Va'ani, Va'ani, V'sulo, and no more than that. Tani Kiruch Lechshev V'leizil, to which the Gemara answers, Lavdavke, you could argue that it is like Rabbi Yudah Nasiya, that it's the amount of time for Toch Kidei Dibur plus 1. And the reason why the Mishnah doesn't say Va'ani, 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 Va'ani is because Tani Kiruch L'Echshev V'leizil, what? Do we have to be like a peddler, peddling out his wares, this and that, right? All these details, and if you make sure you say this word and make sure you don't say that word. No, the Mishnah is not like a peddler peddling out wares where, where it has to be stingy with its words and being very exact with its words. Otherwise, we can't trust it. No, it says Va'ani Va'ani, but really it could be referring to Va'ani 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 Va'ani. But then why not just mention one of them? Right, Kilu? Why does it say Misha Amar Reini Nazir V'shama Chaver V'Amar Va'ani Va'ani? Why does it say Va'ani Va'ani? Just say 1 Va'ani. So, and for the Gemara, Hachinami Mishum Dikatani Seifa Hutur Arishan Utru Kulan, but because the Seifa says that if the first guy does Ha'ataris Nadarim, so then all of the Naziris go away, Shimon and Levi as well. So Hutar Ha'achron Ha'achron Mutar V'chulan Asurim. But if Levi does Ha'ataris Nadarim, then it only affects Levi, but not Reuven or Shimon. So Mechlal Dika Emtzoi Shemachik Tani Va'ani Va'ani. So that implies, because we're talking about in the Mishnah a Rishon and an Achron, a first and a last, that implies that there's Arich in the middle. So therefore, that is why the Mishnah said, Va'ani, Va'ani, so that there's Ruvain who made the Naziris, and then you have Shimon and Levi, so now there's three people, and there's also a middle, but potentially, it really could have theoretically said just one Va'ani, that would have been enough, but we say Va'ani, Va'ani, so that there are three characters, and there's a first, a last, and a middle, but really it could theoretically have just said one. Ibayu de asa kasha. Chad b'chavre mitpis, o dilma bekama mitpise. You hear the kasha? That when you have Reuven who says that he is a Nazir, Shimon says, me too. Levi says, me too. What's Levi saying me too to? Who is Levi saying me too to? Is Levi saying me too to Reuven, or is he saying me too to Shimon? That's the shaila. That when Levi says me too, is he going back? Is he saying, right? Reuven says he's a Nazir. Shimon says me too. Levi says me too. Me too what? I'm a Nazir like Shimon, or I'm a Nazir like Reuven? What's Levi saying? My nafkamina, who cares? Le'atpuse umezel. Well, can Yehuda then say me too? Can Yisachar say me too? Zvulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. Can all of them say me too? Can they just keep on going on forever? Well, if each subsequent person is just saying me too to the person prior, well then as long as they say it within Tokle Dibur of the person before them, so then Beseder, they're going to be a Nazir. But if you say that each fellow is reverting back to Reuven, to the original guy, well then you only have Toch K'dei Dibur from the original utterance. So only Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda would be able to say Va'ani, 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 at that, after which point it's already Toch K'dei Dibur, it's past Toch K'dei Dibur from Reuven, and so it's Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Yisachar already would be too late. So that's the kasha. Is each person, when he says me too, is he doing it based on the guy before him, or is it all reverting back to Reuven, the OG, the original? Tashma coming here. Hareini Nazir. Okay. This is our Mishnah. It says, if a fellow says that he is a Nazir, V'shama chaveroi v'omer, Shimon hears that and he says Va'ani, Va'ani. Right? So Shimon hears that and he says Va'ani. And Levi hears it and he also says Va'ani. V'su lo midi, Shmamina bekamahu demat pese. That our Mishnah seems to be pretty specific, right? It doesn't, go on forever. Right? Our Mishnah doesn't say that if Reuben says he's going to be a Nazir, and then you have Va'ani, 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 Va'ani. It doesn't give like a never-ending list of Va'anis. It only gives two. And that's it, implying that at a certain point you run out. Implying that Shmamina Bakama Udamat Peseh, that they're all reverting back to Reuven, the OG, the originator. And therefore, you're limited in how many times you could say Va'ani before Toch K'dei Dibur runs out from the first guy. Because if it enters your mind to say that each person is saying me too to the previous fellow, Lisnei Tuva Va'ani. So let it just continue saying Va'ani, 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 Va'ani. But it doesn't. So therefore it must be that it's based on the original fellow and it runs out. And for the Gemara, Lav Davke, you could say that it's each one Chad B'Chavre, but Tani Kiruch L'Leichshe V'Leizel, the Mishnah is not like a peddler that it needs to, say this and that and that and that. Otherwise you're going to think, otherwise you're not going to understand it properly, whatever. The Mishnah kind of takes like the more chilled path, and therefore it says Va'ani, Va'ani, but really it could keep on going. Well, if that's the case, then why are we saying Va'ani, Va'ani? Just say Va'ani once. Like we said earlier, that since we mentioned, if the first one does Ataras and Darim, or the last one does Ataras and Darim, Mechlal, Deika, and Tzai, implying that we're talking about where there's a middle, Mishum, Hachi Katani, Va'ani, Va'ani. That's why we mentioned Va'ani, Va'ani, so that there's a Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. You have three people, a first, a last, and a middle. Tashma, come and here. Hutter Arishin, that if Reuven gets Ataras and Darim, Hutru Kulan, well then all of them are permitted. Rishon hu disharu, that specifically if the Rishon, if Reuven gets Ataras Nadarim, then all of them are are no longer Nazirs. But if Shimon gets where am I? But if Shimon if Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, then it does not have an effect on Levi, right? If Reuven does Ataris Nedarim, then it has an effect on Shimon and Levi. If Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, it has no effect on Levi. Which means that both Shimon and Levi are reverting back to Reuven when they say me too. When they say that they're going to be a Nazir, they're saying that each one is saying that they're going to be a Nazir like Reuven. And that is why when Reuven does a Hataris Nidarim, so then both Shimon and Levi are no longer Nazirs. But if Shimon does Hataris Nidarim, it has no effect on Levi, because Levi is not a Nazir like Shimon, Levi is a Nazir like Reuven. Ema lach le'olam chad b'chavei matbis. No, really I will say that no, Levi is a Nazir like Shimon. Ve'aidi deboi misna hutru kulon. But what the Mishnah is saying is that if Reuven does Ataris Nedarim, so then both Shimon and Levi are no longer Nazirs, as opposed to if Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, then Reuven is still a Nazir, just Levi isn't. Right? The Itana Emtsoi Ika Rishon Delo Mishterei Mishumachi Katani Rishon. That if Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, well, then while Levi would no longer be a Nazir, Reuven would still be a Nazir, and therefore, right, we're only talking about where doing Ataris Nedarim affects all of them, right? So the Mishnah says that if Reuven does Ataris Nedarim, so then it affects him and Shimon and Levi. But if Shimon would do Ataris Nedarim, it would only affect Levi. It wouldn't affect Reuven. But you could still say that Levi, when he says he's going to be a Nazir, he's being a Nazir like Shimon, not necessarily a Nazir like Reuven. Tashma coming here. Hutra achrin, if Levi does Ataris Nedarim, ha'achrin mutter, so Levi is no longer a Nazir, v'chulan asurin, but Reuven and Shimon are both Nazirs. Diloika achrina basir, because there's nobody else with him. Right? Meaning nobody else said that they were a Nazir like Levi. Aval emtsoi deika achrina basrei mystery. But if Shimon were to do a Ataris Nedarim, so then Levi would no longer be a Nazir. Shma min echad b'chavei matbis, which would mean that when Levi says he's a Nazir like Shimon. And therefore, right, meaning we're saying if Levi does Ataris Nedarim, so it only affects Levi, implying that if Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, it would not only affect Shimon. Levi also would no longer be a Nazir, implying that when Levi made himself a Nazir, he made himself a Nazir like Shimon. No, I could still say that no, Levi, when he makes himself a Nazir, it's like Reuven, umay achrin dekatoni, and when it says that if the last one makes Ataris Nedarim, it only affects him, emtsoi. By the Tana Rishon, Tana Achrin. No, Achrin is actually a reference to Shimon, the middle guy. So why does it call him the Achrin and not the middle guy? Because since it's, as opposed to Reuven who's the Rishon, so it calls Shimon the Achrin. But really it is talking about the middle guy, and we're saying that even if Levi does Ataris Nedarim, it only affects the middle guy, which is Shimon, and even if Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, it only affects Shimon, does not affect Levi. So we could say that both Shimon and Levi, when they're saying that they're Nazir, it's like Reuven. Wow, this is like actual Gemara. Like you have to actually I'd say even a little bit more than borderline confusing. Like you can make mistakes here. We haven't had Gemaras like that where you can like make mistakes in a while. Well, yeah, maybe you guys disagree. Tashma, come in here. The Tanya Be'edja that was taught explicitly. Here we go. Problem solved. Hutu Arishin, that if the first fellow does a Ataris Nedarim, Hutru Kulon, so then all of them are no longer Nazirs. Hutu Achrin, if Levi does Ataris Nedarim, Achrin Mutur V'chulan Asurin, well then it only affects Levi, but Shimon and Reuven are still Nazirs. Huter emtsoi, if Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, Heimenu Ulamato Mutter, so then him and Levi are no longer Nazirs. Heimenu Ulamalo Aser, Ruvain would still be a Nazir. Shmamina, Chad B'chaver Matbis Shmamina. So we see that each one is saying that they are a Nazir like the previous one. So when Levi says he's a Nazir, he's saying he's a Nazir like Shimon, and therefore when Shimon does Ataris Nedarim, Levi is no longer a Nazir either, but Ruvain is. So there you go. Each one is being a Nazir like the fellow prior to him. Okay. The Mishnah had said already, Nazir v'shama chaver v'amar pi kefiv v'sayri kesayri v'chulei. Oh. So if Reuven says that he's going to be a Nazir, and Shimon says, my mouth is like his mouth, my hair is like his hair, he's a Nazir. Mishum da'amar pi kefiv v'sayri kesayri arei Nazir. In fact, the Gemara, I don't understand, because Shimon says that my mouth is like his mouth and my hair is like his hair, that makes Shimon a Nazir. V'aminu, we have a contradiction. Yodi Nazira, v'ragli Nazira. If a fellow says my hand is a Nazira, my leg is a Nazira, lo amar klum, he says gunisht. He says absolutely nothing. It's irrelevant. Roshi Nazira, kvedi Nazira. If he says my head is a Nazir, my liver is a Nazir, how is a Nazir? Then he's taka Nazir, because right, ze'aklal davar sh'aneshama tluya bo. How is a Nazir? That if he says that he's a Nazir, right, that a part of his body that's a vital organ, his head, his liver, but not his mouth or his hair. So Amr of Yehuda, the Amr Hachi. Rav Yehuda says like this. Yaisa pi kefiv miyayin, that my mouth should be like his mouth with regard to not drinking wine. V'sayu kesari milagos, and my hair should be like his hair with regard to not getting a haircut. Alright friends, now I think we're just gonna go now straight until the end of Chav Beis Amud Aleph. I think we're just gonna go for it. Alright, so the Mishnah had said already, Nazira v'shama baila v'amar v'ani and yachol hafer. So if a woman says that she is a Nazira, and her husband says, Va'ani, me too, Enu Yachal Hafer, he's not going to be able to be Mayfair that her Naziris, and the implication being, because if he's Mayfair the Naziris, so then Memele, if he's made for her Naziris, and he had said Va'amin, so then by being made for hers, he's automatically being made for his as well, which came subsequently, but he can't be made for his own nether. He would have to do Ataris Nedarim, so he can't be made for her nether. Fine. Okay, when a husband is mefer the Naziris of his wife, is he mefer her Naziris, like he uproots it retroactively, or just from this point onwards? Who cares? Well, if you have a woman who says that she's a Nazira, and then her friend hears, right, Sarah and Rivka. Sarah says she's a Nazira, Rivka hears it, and she says, me too. Now, Sarah's husband hears that she made this neder Naziris, and he's mayfair the neder Naziris. If you say that he uproots it retroactively, well, he nami ishteroi, so then Rivka as well would no longer be a Nazira, because the whole thing was uprooted. And if you say that no, the husband is only mayfair from this point onward, well then, but then if he's only been mayfair from this point onwards, well then Rivka, who had taken upon herself to be a Nazira prior to the husband being mayfair, she would remain a Nazira, because it's only from this, right, he's mayfair from this point on. Rivka would remain a Nazira, Sarah would no longer be a Nazira. What is it? Does the husband uproot it retroactively, or is it from this point onwards? Tashma Kominir. Haredi Nazira. If a woman says that she is a Nazira, V'shama Baila ve'omar, and her husband hears and he says, Va'ani, me too, Eino Yochol Hafer. He cannot be Mayfair, he can no longer be Mayfair her Neder Naziris, because he had said me too. V'sakadaitech Baal Megiz Gayis, and if it enters your mind that it's from this point on, well then Leifer Liishto Vehu Litzer. Well, she says she's a Nazira, he says me too. Let him him be made for her neder naziris, which would only take place from this point on, but when he said me too, his neder naziris, which is prior to him being mefer, would be intact. If we say that it's megas guyas, elalav shmamina ba ma'akar akar, which implies that it must be that what's happening is that the husband is uprooting retroactively the naziris. And therefore, that's why he can't do it. Because if she says that she's a nazir and he says me too, and then he is made for her neder naziris, which would retroactively uproot it, which means that it would undo his naziris as well, he can't undo his own naziris, and that's why it's not allowed. So it must be that he's uprooting it retroactively, and that's why he can't be made for, in this case, lo. Lo megas guys, I can make the argument that really he only is made for from this point on. Well, then why can't he be made for her neder naziris after he says amen? Uvidinu delay for la. Well, really, he should be able to say, he should be able to be made for her neder after saying amen, because he's only going to be made for her neder from this point on, and he would remain a nazir. This is why he can't do that. Because once he says va'ani, it's as if he's being mekayim the neder. That when she says that she's a nazir and he says va'ani, yeah, me too, he's saying, yeah, great idea, be a nazira. You know what, I'm also going to be a nazir. Well, once he's mekayim it, well then, he says, look, he can do ataris nedarim on the hakama, but if he doesn't do that, so then he can't be mefer it because he was mekayim it when he says amen. So I could say that really the husband when he undoes the neder, it's megas guides, it's from this point onward. But the reason why he can't be made for the case the neder naziris once he says amen to her neder naziris is because amen is basically saying that he's being mekayim her neder, and then he can't be made for it anymore. You'd have to do ataris nedarim by you have to do a ataris nedarim either by whatever, by 3 ajotos, by a yochid mumche, fine. Okay. Tashma come near isha shenadra benazir. So if you have a woman and she makes a neder naziris, ve'frishas be'emta, and she already set aside her animals that she's gonna offer as a korban at the end of her naziris, but then her husband is made for her neder. But she had already set aside these animals. Look, if the animals belong to him, well then they can go back and graze with the flock. But if the animals belong to her, well then the chatos needs to die. But if it enters your mind that the husband uproots the her naziris retroactively, well then why does her korban chatas that she had set aside have to die? It should just be retroactively made permitted. It should be chulin. So lav shmamina bal megas guys. So it must be that the husband is only mefer from this point on, and that's why her korban chatas has to die. Lo le'ema loch bal me'akar okar. No, really, I'll say to you that the husband does uproot the naziris retroactively. Okay, well then why does her chatas have to die? V'ainu taima. This is why kevan de lo tzricha kapara havas kechatas shemesu ba'aleh. Well, because she had set aside this animal as a korban chatas, and now she no longer needs it because her husband uprooted her naziris retroactively. So it's it's equivalent. We're treating it as a korban chatas who its owner died. The gemir de chatas shemesu ba'aleh tamus, and I guess gemir as well. Halacha Moshe Misinai that a korban chatas that its owners died. Well, then the korban chatas has to die as well, and that is why we kill her korban chatas. But yeah, you could say though that the husband is mefer her naziris retroactively. Tosh makam here, ha'isha shenadra benazir, a woman who says that she's going to be a nazira, v'oisa shosa yain mitama l'meisim, and she's drinking wine, she's becoming tuma mitama l'meisim. Ha'isa sofeges esar boy, so she gets makis, as we're going to learn on Daf Chav Gimel. Now, what is this case that the Mishnah had to teach us that if she says she's going to be Nazira and then she's violating her Naziris, the Mishnah has to teach us she's going to get makis? Well, if it's talking about a situation where the husband was not mefer the neder Naziris. Stam, she said she's going to be Nazir, and then she goes and she starts drinking wine. Well, does it even need to? It goes without saying. Obviously, she's going to get malchus. So rather, must be talking about a situation where the husband is mefer the neder Naziris, and that's the chiddush. That he's made for the neder Naziris, but still she needs to get malchus for having drank wine or becoming tamei meis. But if you say that the husband uproots the Naziris retroactively, well then why should she have to get malchus? There never was any Naziris. So Ella Lav Shmamina Bal Megiz, guys, rather must be that the husband is only mefer from this point on, and that's why she gets malchus. Lola Meimalach Bal Mi'akar Akar. No, really I'll say to you that the husband uproots the Naziris retroactively. Umishum. Okay, so if the husband were to be made for the neder Naziris, then she would not get malchus because he uproots it retroactively. So then the Mishnah must be talking about, right? Why is she getting malchus? Well, because he wasn't made for the neder, right? So the Mishnah says if a woman says she's going to be a Nazira and then she starts drinking wine, she gets malchus. Isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious. But umishum de katani seifa. But because the Mishnah then goes on to say, heifer la baila, that in the situation where her husband was made for her neder, v'hilo yada v'isa shosa yain u'mitam l'meisim, and she didn't know that her husband was made for her neder Naziris, and she went ahead and she drank wine, she became mitam l'meisim. She does not get malchus. Tana nami reisha sofeges. So that's where the reisha says that she does get malchus. Meaning, the reisha when it says that she gets malchus is talking about a woman. She says she's going to be a Nazira, and she starts drinking wine, becoming tamei mesim. So she gets malchus. Isn't that obvious? But because we wanted to say that, the Mishnah went on to say, but in a situation that her husband was made for her neder, even if she didn't know that he was made for her neder, but he was, then she doesn't get malchus. And therefore, since we talked about the case where she doesn't get malchus, we also mentioned the case where she does get malchus, but on its own, yes, it's not a particularly big chiddush, but it's really only there in support of the seifa of the Mishnah, which gives us a case where she wouldn't get the malchus. Fine. Let's go weiter. Let's wrap up. We're really going to get halfway through Daf Chav Beis Amud Aleph, but it's all the same. The thing is, it's all the same sugya. Until the end of the Amud, it's all the same sugya talking about, if we pick up from here tomorrow, we're going to be in the middle of the sugya. It's going to be another 5 minutes. We'll just, go weiter. Wow, I'm actually it's taking a lot of energy to record this stuff. It's not like that so much in Darim and Nazir that it takes a lot of energy. But in Masechta Nazir, there have been a few more of these kinds of daf that really you got to get your kishkis involved. So, okay, I get my kishkis involved. All right. Tashma. So we're still trying to figure out when a husband is made for the neder naziris of his wife, is it retroactive or is it from this point and onward? Tashma coming here. Isha shenadra b'nazir, a woman who says that she's going to be a nazir, v'nit meis, and she became tumeya, v'achar kach efer la baila. So she says she's going to be a nazira. She became tumeya. Then her husband was made for the neder. Mevia chata sa'ov ve'nevia ola sa'ov. So she brings a chata sa'ov. Right, normally a Nazir becomes Tamei, brings a Chatas off, an Olas off, and a Asham, I believe. Chatas, Ola, and Asham, I believe. Chatas off, Olas off, and Asham. So we say that if her husband is made for the Neder Naziris, she nonetheless brings a Chatas off. V'i Salkedaitech Balmeges Gaiz. Teisinami olasof. Right, so it says that she brings a chatasof but not an olasof. And if we say though that the husband is only made for the neder from this point on, and she already became tmeya as an azira, so then why does she only bring the chatasof? She should also bring the olasof. And we summon the ashram as well. Velamai miakar akar. But what are you going to say that the husband is retroactively uprooting the naziris? Well then chatasof nami lo teisi. Well, then she also shouldn't have to bring the Chatas off if we're just uprooting the entire Naziris retroactively. Why does she have to bring a Chatas off? So, Achinami. En Achinami. She shouldn't have to bring the Chatas off. However, V'amani Rabbi Lazar HaKaper, this is Rabbi Lazar HaKaper, Titania, as we learned the other day even, we also learned a few times, Rabbi Lazar Kapper Bribi Omer Matamlomim Ashachot Al Nefesh. Why does it say by a Nazir that the Nazir sinned? Which soul did the Nazir sin against? But it's because the Nazir depraved himself, I think, held himself back, denied himself the pleasure of wine. Nikra chote, that's why he's called the sinner. A Nazir who only restricted himself from one thing, from wine, he's called the sinner. Somebody who, I believe it's in the context of fasting, somebody who fasts and makes everything asur to him, so then certainly he would be considered a sinner. So we see that because she's considered a sinner, that's why she brings the olas off. But in terms of the husband being retroactively uprooting the Naziris, yes, he retroactively uproots the Naziris, but she nonetheless brings the chatas off, the chatas off, because by being a Nazira, she deprived herself of wine, and she needs to bring a korban chatas for that. Tashma. Kamanir Detanya Behedra, here we go, we learn it explicitly. Isha Shenadra Benazir, that if a woman makes a neder Naziris V'shama Chaverta V'amra V'ani, and her friend hears and says me too, Uvabayla Shavishona V'eferla, and then the husband of the first woman is made for her neder, he mutaris V'chavera Asura, so the wife is mutaris, but the friend who said me too is Asura, Shmamina Baal Megiz Gaius. So clearly we see that the husband is only being made for from this point on. That's why the friend remains in Nazira. But if the friend would have said that I am like you, right? If we have Sarah and Rivka, Sarah says that she's going to be Nazira, Rivka says I'm like you, and then Reuven is Mayfair, Sarah's nether, so then it would be Mayfair for Rivka as well. It's like in computer programming that depends, if you set the variable. If you set the value of one variable to be the value of another variable, so then if you change one, it affects the other. But if you set the value of one variable to be the equivalent of the value of another variable, so then there are two separate, basically objects, if you're working with like objects and stuff, I guess. Whatever. It's a computer programming thing. It's an important distinction to know. Akoponim. Friends, that was Daf Chaf Aleph. Well, that was technically Daf Chaf Aleph, but also half of Daf Chaf and also half of Daf Chaf Beis of Masechta Nazir. Friends, we started the fourth parak of Masechta Nazir. We talked about some interesting stuff about like Toch Kedei Dibur. If a fellow says he's going to be a Nazir, and then other people say me too. Within Toch Kedei Dibur, we then ask the shaila of when each subsequent person says that they're also going to be a Nazir, is it like the person before them or like the original fellow? At the end of the day, we said that each person is committing to be a Nazir like the person before them. And then we asked the kasha of if a husband is made for the neder naziris of his wife, is he being made for it retroactively, or is he being made for it from this point on? And we ultimately said that he's being made for it from this point on. Friends, that was Daf Chaf Aleph of Masechta Nazir. Open joy, peace out, bye.